We are living in a very interesting time in which health and the cause of disease is most important to be known. So that's why we are going in a few hours, in this few days, through the understanding of nature and its laws. And of course, we also want to build on solid science, and we want to know what is the foundation of all science. So welcome to the Law of Life seminar. As a physician, of course, I have a question when the patient comes to me to understand where does his disease coming from. That's the most important question that the patient would have, and usually they have it. But usually we don't have an answer to that. Just a few weeks ago, I had a young lady, about 35 years old, and she had a sudden hearing loss on her left ear 2 months ago. Now, she has been to different doctors. She even had surgical intervention, and that's what happened is that she goes from doctor to doctor to know why did she lost her hearing on the left ear. Now she comes in my practice because of reference with her physiotherapists, and I am talking to her and I'm telling her that it's not a big thing to know why she lost her hearing. Now, how can I be so sure about the origin of disease? How can I do that? It sounds sometimes presumptuous, or some of my critics might tell that it's just a presumptuous statement. What is the ground on what he bases his sayings? And that's a fair question. I must stand to know exactly why I can tell her or every one of my patients why they're sick. And this is so important, but because if science is built on just maybes, then it does not really work. It does not help. Now, since the lady is an educated person, she was somehow surprised with my simple statement that I know the cause of her disease. I know the cause of her hearing loss. And we entered into a conversation in which she was doubting my sayings. And that's also very fair, because you come from a relative scientific way of thinking to one that says we must have 100% surety when we talk about science. When we talk about health, we must know. If not, why would we talk about health if we don't know where it comes from? And I asked her, what would she love to have for a doctor who, when she comes to him, might say, let's think, maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, or let's explore here. Would you like such a doctor? Or would you like a doctor that just says, okay, that's the cause, and that's how we can take away the cause and then also do some treatment if there is any possibility? And I hope that every one of you would like to have a physician that just knows how things work and also can explain to you why it is so. So this is my purpose for sharing this. This is my purpose why I do seminars, and I have traveled the last 12 years all over in order to help everyone understand how important it is to know themselves and to know why they have the affections they have. Now, what is the basis for my surety? So, the laws of nature. How nature works is the basis of all science. If we don't understand the laws of nature, how can we do real science? And if we don't understand the human being that has its place in this nature, how can we say anything about the origin of disease? And how can we say anything about disease if we don't know the needs of mankind, if we don't know the needs by what all things work? All these three things are absolutes. They have no way to change. The laws of nature are everlasting laws. The way the human being works and is set together is a unchangeable thing. Yes, you can destroy the human being, but you never can change its way to function and its way the structure is put together. And the needs of humanity are unchangeable. We all need oxygen, we all need food, we all need water and all other basic needs. So all those things are absolutes. So if you work with absolutes, then you come to absolutes results. This is how I work. So let's start to see the law of this universe, the law that we can see that is basic to everything that we find around us. And there is not one exception to that. And that basic law is based on two pillars, so to say. Nothing can exist or function by itself. That is, everything is dependent on energy. Everything is dependent on being sustained. Nothing can do anything without power. And then the next pillar is nothing can do anything for itself. So each element is in a service of all the other elements it's connected to. That's why everything in this universe works according to a channel. That is, it must take the power or the means that it needs in order to do something with them and give further that what they took. So this is the general principle of everything. You can look around yourself and you can check nature and see if anything serves its own purpose. There's nothing. We have the flowers, we have the trees, they make fruits. For whom do they do that? Is it for their own service, for their own purpose? Do they need the fruit that they make? There's nothing, absolutely nothing, that serves itself. That's why it's so basic. This basic law of the universe is that everything must have for this cause an entrance and an exit. There must be a cause and an effect for everything. So the law of cause and effect is the basic law. We know that no effect can come without a cause. And if we understand the principle of function as a channel, it is self-evident that everything must work in a circuit. Looking to the human being, we see the nerves, how they go from the same place and coming back, the impulse. As we see the blood vessels, everything starts from the heart and comes back to the heart. Everything in the technical world, it cannot work except in a circuit, because every element that is put together there has this basic way of function, and there is no exception. That's the beauty of understanding nature, and its laws. It makes us, since our mind is in need of 100% security, things that are so and are not changeable. That's what makes us, I say so, strong, and gives us, when we explore nature, a understanding of why things happen the way they happen. So we will look to this basic law that nothing can exist or function by itself, and nothing can do anything for itself. Is that what will be the basis of all our study? And since it's absolute, we must come to an absolute conclusion. Now, there are other absolutes, and that what is also absolute about the human being is that what we all as humans have in common. And we all have in common a structure. The way we all are built is identical. So there is not one human who has this structure and the other has that structure and is built like that. Well, there are anomalies, things outside of the normal, but that's because of a result. But it's not because that's the normal. So we would have no anomalies if we would not have one basic structure. So the structure of the human being is in every human the same. We have the same organs, we have the same connections to the organs, so there is no difference, even between male and female. It is the same structure. We all have a brain, we all have eyes, we all have skin, and they might look different, they might have different sizes, but that does not matter because the structure remains the same. So in nature we find the diversity in one species. There is not one individual in a species that is identical from its way it looks like, its measurements, its colors. There is not one the same. But it's the same flower, like say, the same species of flowers. They might be, each individual of this is different, but they all have the same organs, they all have the same structure. Even though each element of the structure has a little bit a different form or a different size or different color. But that is so in nature, in everything. So we cannot build on something that is diverse, but we can build for sure about that what is the same in every individual of that species. And structure is the same. And that's on what we build our science. When we want to know about the human being, we must build scientifically on things that are absolute and that we all have in common. And structure is that, and we will go then a little bit later and find it out how it all is put together. Then there is another absolute things that we all have together, and that is function, how we work. How is the human being working? So how does it come that I can move my hands? Or how is it that my heart is beating or my eye is seeing? How does function work? And this is also something that is absolute. All humans function the same. It doesn't matter if you live in one part of the world or in another. It doesn't matter what color or size you have. Your functions is identical. When you have, let's take the eye or the ear, a physician who knows to deal, like I am an ENT, with the ear, he knows that the function of every ear is the same. It might, in everyone, the ear looks different, but the structure and the function is identical. So we can build on something if we know how the function works. And then when we have a dysfunction, a thing that is not working well, we must know the cause. Because if function is absolute in every human being, we might, putting all things together, find out, I would say, quite easily why things don't work like they are set to work. And then there is a third thing that we mentioned before that is also absolute, and it is the basic needs. What we need to live. That we all have in common. No one else. I mean, there's no exception in one human being that can live without oxygen or food or light or warmth and all those things. Now, a few basic things to function, because disease is, we could call it a dysfunction, even though it's more than just a dysfunction. In order to understand that, we need to know a basic way of functioning. So every function that we have in nature needs at least two elements in order to work. So we need first the element that generates the function, like taking the engine of a car, it might need the electrical circuit before it can work. Like also the plants, before a seed can germinate, it must have a electrical impulse in order to make that thing going. And then, of course, it needs that which sustains the function, which is the fuel for the engine, which is also chemistry, but all the nutrients that then the seed picks up from the ground and from its environment in order to grow and to work. So there are always two elements. Now, if the plant has no supply of fuel, it will wither and die. But also if you disconnect it, you cut something away and that circuit is, so to say, disconnected, broken, it will also die, even though it might have enough nutrients. It's like with the engine. You might run out of fuel, which stops. But if you can have the reservoir full of fuel, and if you stop the circuit that makes the engine work, it also stops. That's how we function. That's how things go. And that's a basic thing that I think must be known in the back when we go further understanding the human being. Now, I put here together those things that I see from the law of life, from the law of nature that human works. So we are all put in a law. And that law says that life is dependent on its needs. A law always governs dependency. If we as humans would be independent of needs, of course, we would work out of ourselves. It would be a perpetuum mobile. What is not known, it's not possible. We all see that we have needs. And all these needs are set by the law. That's why our life is conditioned by our needs. And if all needs would be fulfilled, then we would have normal function and 100% health. There would be no dysfunction, no health issue if all our needs would be fulfilled. So disease is an effect of needs not being fulfilled. And since on physical level we always have a balance, if you have too less of it or too much of it, it's the same. It's not in the law, it's not in that setting that the law is governing. So if we have needs that are missing, we have disease or dysfunction. And if we, like example, eat too much or drink too much, we get dysfunctions because we are out of the balance that is set there. And we have the dysfunction, so to say, as to understand what's not fulfilled in our lives. And of course, then if we don't understand the message of our body, then of course we might go on until we get to that border in which there is no way back, and that is death. And you can die from too less, and you can die from too much. So for us, important is to understand our needs so that when we get into dysfunctions, when we have symptoms, we might understand what they say. So for this purpose, you need to know what kind of needs the human being has. So knowing that we cannot live without needs, it is important. What are they? And of course, we have basic needs and we have needs that are not basic. That is, they are not necessary by all means to be satisfied. Wishes that we all have, and they are different, but we have also not basic needs that we have in common, like the need for beauty, for cleanness, the need for marriage, and all those things. Those are needs, but they are not basic needs. You can live without it. I call that a basic need, that life without that is not possible. That's the basic need. The plus needs, it's nice to have them, but life is still going on, even though you miss those not basic needs. So here we need a little bit to know what are the basic needs. What is basically needed that our life should function normally and we should be healthy, not having any diseases, any pains and all this, hearing losses or whatever befalls the human race. So we know from what we saw before that we need two needs at least in order to function. Those are different ones. And we all have learned, and as a physician I learned, that humans have a need for physical needs, for oxygen, for water, for warmth. And no one needs to teach us when our body reacts to one of these things, missing them or they being too much, like taking warmth when it is outside cold and we are freezing, and it's a body reaction. We cannot choose to not feel it. It might be different from person to person. It's subjective perception, but everyone has this norm of 37 degrees Celsius, and when you get into a lower temperature, your body will react, no matter how you perceive it. And on the other side, if there is too much heat, then you are sweating, you are feeling it. No one needs to teach you when you're hungry that you miss food, when you're thirsty that you miss water, when you're tired that you miss sleep. And then what is it when you have a sudden hearing loss? Or what is it when you have a flu? Or what is it? What does the human being miss that he has this body reactions that we must understand. What is it when you have a ringing in the ear or dizziness? What does the body tell you? Because it's a reaction that is not under our control, like the freezing and the sweating and the hunger. Except we satisfy the needs, then it's under control. But when it comes, it shows just that something needs to be satisfied there. And so, never learning the basics in my university, because it's amazing that we learn so many things, but not the foundation, I would say, of science, understanding that there are at least two needs that make function to work. So not understanding that. That's why most physicians have no idea when you have a sudden hearing loss. What happened? What did work wrong? Or in heart attack, how does that work? Why does it happen? Now we say, well, he may not eat the right food, but we have people who eat the right food and they have the same thing. Like those who supposedly don't eat the right food. So I had no idea when I started 17 years ago in my practice. I did not know what the human being misses when he comes to me with his symptoms. But I was not satisfied to just say, okay, I don't know. I'm not all knowledgeable. I might admit that I cannot know everything. Yes, I cannot know everything. But that what needs to work for health, I must know. That's why I am a physician. And so here is it so important that we understand that basic functions cannot work just with one kind of needs. And the chemistry, yes, there is a need. It's an absolute need. But it's something that humans need more. And that I found out by talking to them. And I will in a few minutes also show my working method. But I found out in the way I was asking my patient that there are also spiritual needs like love, righteousness, liberty, security. And those are needs that you only think about. You don't feel them. They are purely, I would say, imaginary. But they are there. Righteousness, liberty, security. It's something that you cannot say, oh, I don't need it. Everyone needs these needs. And I was thinking, okay, I never learned something like that in my university. You don't find in the scientific books, at least on a large scale, the need of love, of righteousness, of liberty, of security, of truth, and all those purely spiritual needs. Why are they spiritual? Because they have no physical or chemical definition. You cannot put them in a chemical reaction. It's not possible. That's why they are outside of the physical world. They are purely spiritual. It's an idea, a thought. What is a thought? So I had to, and I was surprised about this because I had not studied about this. And I came to understand that there is no limit. Never a spiritual need can be too much because they are 100% always. Love must be 100%. Righteousness must be 100%. You cannot have 99% righteousness because then it would be unrighteousness. You cannot have 99% liberty and then that's no liberty. All the spiritual needs we have are absolute needs, as they must be 100%. So the only way to have body reactions is when you miss them. And what is then the reaction of the body that shows the missing of the spiritual needs? And I could say it's disease in all its forms. This is my finding that I already found out after a few years of studying the human being. How did I do this? So the working method was you take the patient and his age and go through his life from birth until the age he is now. And I had put together the physical history, that's what we learned in medical school, that it's important to put together the list of the physical complaints. So I put together the headache when it starts, the neck tension when it starts, the ringing in the ear when it starts, when it happened, or dizziness. And you can go through the list with all the physical complaints. And of course, at the beginning, I took only those who are in my field as an ENT. But the human being is one. We cannot put it in fields, but we cannot separate one thing from the other. They all work in a circuit. So later on, I came to understand I have in front of me a whole human being, not just pieces like a nose or an ear or a tongue or a throat or speech organs. It's a whole human being. So I take today all physical complaints, no matter in which field they are, because there is one body with many organs. So you put them and you see the time when they appear. So it's important to take the symptoms, but also their appearance and how long do they last. And if they are still there, then you know, okay, it started 10 years ago and the migraine is still there. Then you know, okay, the things are not solved. Then I went to the surgical interventions. What did they have for surgeries in their past? If the tonsils are being removed, the appendix, the gallbladder, and all other organs. And when did they take place and what was the issue, why they were removed? So you must do a very solid history of what happened in the body. And this I did, and I still do it. It's most important, it's basic to understand the body reactions. When was the tonsil and so on taken out? And then you have children. And if you're a female, how was the delivery of the children? The miscarriages. So all the possible physical symptoms I put together on one side. And then I put on the other side the mental history. And here I asked the patients about relationships. Relationships between the parents. How did they get along? How was childhood? How is the relationship with mother? How is the relationship with father, spouse, and children? Of course, in order to do the mental history, I invited my patient for a second appointment in which I took the time for an hour or 1 hour and a half so that I could explore their history. See, when I had patients at the beginning who showed many bodily symptoms, so many diseases, I said, wow, I must know their history to understand why they have so much of body symptoms. Because you see, some people have everything. It's just like looking like they picked everything up that's out there. And then you wonder, what's going on? And so those were special patients which I asked to come. I said, I need your history, your mental history. I need to know, where have you been going through, so that I wanted to understand, is there a relationship between what people lived for events in their life, like marriage, divorce, deaths of loved ones, or whatever comes through life? When did they happen? I put them and compared them to the physical symptoms. And it was amazing to see that there was a relationship between them. That is, I could see the event and the physical symptom. And they were in a time relation. And the event was always before the symptom. And then, of course, you take the events of employment conditions, if they have work and no work, what kind of work, and all these details. You need time for this, but it's very rewarding to see with what the human being is occupied and what it encounters. And of course, then you ask for special events like traumata, which are physical abuses of any kind. What have they experienced, like being in war, or things that impress the human mind so strongly that you cannot forget them. So all those things were there in order to put them together. And it was such an interesting, so to say, journey for me to see that what we have missed in medical school, what we have missed and we still miss in health, to take the human as a whole, to take the human with his thoughts, to understand that he is not just physical. And this discussion that we have now, and this crisis that we have in the world, it's so important to not miss what's even more important than health. What's even more important than life. We will see that there is something in every human being that is more important than health and life. And those are the needs, the spiritual needs, love. Now, we all think, and I hope none of you is not a person that thinks. Life is not possible without thinking. But to thoughts, there is given almost no attention in the human being. I know, how often have you been with a physician and he asks you what you think? Well, we are not trained even to pay attention that the human being is a thinking being. That amazes me still today, especially in this crisis. We'll see that the thoughts obviously are not important. Really? What does the human being does most? Does he breathe, sleep, eat, drink? Are those his most occupations? I think everyone knows that thought, thinking, is something you never stop, not even in sleep. You're still thinking, you're dreaming, you're occupying yourself. Yes, you're not aware, but it's still a thought process there. How come that in science, that what the human being does most, that what is his main activity, has not a main foundation or a main attention? It looks like that only what is physical is there in the attention of the medical science. What is it? Have we dealt with what are thoughts? You see, I had to put this question to myself. What are they? Do you have a book where you find it out? Do you have any, scientific things where they say, let's look what are thoughts? At least I was not. I haven't seen them around. But they should be basic because that's what we are. It's what we think. Where do they come from? Now, where is the origin of thoughts? Where do they start? I think if thinking is the most important thing in life, and that's what we do all the time, then it should be known where it originates. What is the origin of the thought, of our thoughts? And then another question, where do they start? Now that was something that I said to myself, I need to find out. Where does the thought process start? Because I realized that there where the thought process starts, there the human being starts to function. I must know, where do they start? Because then I can track them back. If not, I say, don't know. There are questions from depressed people, but also not depressed people, from fearful people. Where does the fearful thought come? How does that I perceive fear? And I see how the body reactions are on fear. Where do the thought that produces fear starts? I must know it. I must know where the thought starts. I need to kill myself. Where is the root of every thought? Can we know that? We must know, because there must be a beginning of everything. Yes, there must be a cause for every effect. There must be a beginning of function. I must understand, where does the thought start? If I don't know that, how can I understand the human being? How can I understand myself? There is no way, without knowing these things, to know anything about the human being. Because all other things are under this, are not as important as these are. And then, of course, what do? Do they have a function in the human being? Are thoughts doing something, or do they nothing? Am I moving my hands and am I speaking through thoughts? Yes, of course. Everything a human does is the effect of his thoughts. There's nothing that he does that's not the effect of his thoughts. So, what do? They do everything in us. You can do nothing without thinking. It's not possible. So, what is their role then in health? If everything we do comes from our thoughts, then do they play a role in health? Now, we have not paid attention to the human thinking, at least not in medical science. Or if it's random, it's not central. All that is central today is the physical world. But the humans live in their thoughts. That's why what we see in the world today, the fear, it's all a thought process that we need to understand. So I hope you're curious. Everyone needs to put this question to himself if he wants to understand himself and if he wants to understand those around us. So the human being has a structure, it has a function, and it has needs. So we want to go through all this step by step in order to understand it. And going a little bit more into detail as I have just said before. So the first thing I would like to go into you and start in this lecture is structure. Now the structure of the human being is many organs, one organism. That's so basic that it's sometimes forgotten. We are one organism with many organs. And if you go to the cell level, we have billions, trillions of cells. So there is one organism, not more. We are not two, we are not three organisms. We are one. But we are composed of many things. Like, you take a device, in order that it should function, it needs many things. But it's just one thing. You don't go to the shop and buy the pieces of it, you buy one. So the human being has many organs, but is one organism, one individual. And I repeat this because basic things must be always in the back of our minds when we explore and want to find out what we don't know. Yes, because we want to know where disease is coming from. And you cannot calculate the unknown without having a foundation of that calculation, a foundation of exploring the things and then putting all things on an absolute foundation. You must come to an absolute conclusion. So many organs, one organism. Now, where is the control center of the human being? And as this picture suggests, the whole human being is in the brain. And it's even more specific, it's in the brain cortex. So all the wires that put this human being into function and connects all the organs. We have one organism and many organs. That what connects all organs to make it one organism is in the brain. On physical level, in the cortex, all organs are connected. And I hope that's basic understanding. There is nothing new that I say to you. And I think every one of us has seen a brain, and we have this outside layer is the cortex. You see it here. And these two cortexes are not connected together on cortex level. Since the connections come under the cortex, you can cut through until here without cutting through nothing, because they are not connected. They're two half of cortexes. And that's why this is here the right hemisphere. Now going into a more structural picture of the brain, we'll see here the cortexes, and in the cortex we have the neurons, the Purkinje cells, that's how they call, and there we have the whole physical body together. So here in the cortex, everything that happens in our body is governed from. It's all here together. And from here, the nerve axons go into the body. So the cells remain in the cortex, but the wires, like you have them here, they go down. And the first thing they come to is the center of the brain, the limbic system. from this limbic system, they go on and cross the other side after they come out of the limbic system. And so we have moving our right hand from the left hemisphere and the left hand from the right hemisphere. So those are basically the structural things. Now, since we never can just have structure without function, we must combine them. The function is that the cortex functions with electricity, and that electrical impulse goes into the limbic system where it gives a command for the centers that are there to produce chemistry. And we have immediately feedback of the electrical impulse that came through the cortex into the limbic system, going back to the cortex with a chemical reaction, which is what we usually feel. Our emotions are an immediately response of the electrical input that we have put into the cortex. And then, since everything is a channel, it must be passed on, and everyone passes on that which started. Now the question is, where do thoughts come from? Where does all things start? And here we have to put the question, can the brain think? What is its composition? And yes, you can take it apart and you will see you all find only chemistry in the brain. And chemical reactions are limited. They can only occur depending on outside factors. They can only proceed as intended, designed, because the necessary prerequisites for a reaction are always predetermined. A reaction can only happen as it was meant to be able to happen. And of course, chemistry can absorb, store, and share energy and information. That's what we have in our computers. And that is also what we have in the brain. The brain can absorb, store, and share information. But how does it do that? How many thoughts can the brain think? Can he really think, or can he not think? What are the ways that thoughts appear? So how many thoughts do we have in a computer? I hope that every one of you know none. So if the brain is composed of chemistry, if it is a computer, then thinking processes he cannot generate. So chemical elements, and the brain is a chemical element, cannot feel anything. Do you think your brain feels anything? Does the body feel anything? Do the nerves feel anything? Can they choose? Can chemistry choose? Can they make decisions? And can they destroy themselves? Can they have consciousness? They cannot have consciousness, cannot have cognitive abilities, cannot have morals. So where do these capacities of the human being come? So humans can do these things. They can feel. I hope you can. They can destroy themselves. In this crisis, we have more death and more damages, because through the information the human being processes, it must destroy itself if it does not recognize the wrong information. Human beings die on their own hands. They can destroy themselves. A computer cannot do that. Nothing in nature that is physical can destroy itself. It's not possible. The law is not permitting it. Because every physical thing just reacts. But a human being can act. He must not react. He reacts, of course, too, but he must not. He acts. An action cannot have its origin in chemistry, because everything that we see in this nature on physical level, and we can only see physical things, they are reactions. And never ever possible to destroy themselves. But a human being can do that. And today, it's as evident as it is. It was never before so evident on a global level that the human being, on accordance of the way he thinks, kills himself. That has never been before. So where does the ability come to destroy himself? Now, humans have the ability of cognitive things. So obviously, these two people here, they have a cognitive issue. And I think all of us have cognitive issues. That is, we see something and we don't like it. How can chemistry realize something and does not like it? And how does it come that some people like this and others don't like this? So, that what we like cannot be in chemistry. Humans can like things differently, and they perceive things differently. Where is that? And they can choose. What a privilege, isn't it? They can choose. I think that's one of the most nicest things. We can choose how to do things. We are able. Have you ever seen a computer who chooses everything, anything? Have you seen any chemistry that does that? So the question at the end of this first lecture is, where do these abilities come from? We must know it. It's not something that you say, okay, I don't need to know this. No. If you want to be healthy, if you want to control your life and not get into the issue of destroying yourself through all the circumstances that you are in, we must understand ourselves. We must know how we are, what our structure is. We must know where our thoughts are coming from. We must understand our being. And for me, this is the greatest privilege a human has. He can look into the mirror. Everything in this nature does something. The animals do their job, but they have no way of looking into the mirror. They have no way of studying themselves and finding out why are things like they are. I find this one of the greatest privileges that we as humans have. We can look into the mirror. We can see ourselves. We can see things and ask ourselves, why is it so? And this is, I think, that should also challenge you to understand yourself. And so we were going further in this seminar, exploring that which is the same in every human being, that you and I have in common, so that we might understand ourselves and also each other.